Hey, everybody, welcome to the Jim Master Show live entertainment lifestyle talk show series. I hope you guys are in the mood to be entertained because you're going to be, because we have a legend here. We have jazz guitarist extraordinaire, composer, and teacher, Grammy and Emmy nominated David Becker joining us live from Greater Los Angeles, California. We're so excited to have him here. He has worked with some of the greats. Of course, he is the leader of the David Becker Tribune. And he is all poised with his guitar, and he's going to be joining us in just a second. How's everybody doing? It's so good to see you here. If this is your first time, we welcome you to our Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series where we're bringing back that lost art of conversation, poignant moments, lots of levity, good times, like an old school talk show you remember from television to Cavett and Carson and all the greats. But a modern twist too, a modern vibe that we throw in to the mix here. We always have a good time. Our audience is watching throughout the world right now live. They comment live. We invite you to do that. If you'd like to comment live, definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can comment live. Matter of fact, we would love it if you subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't, and click the notification bell so you never miss any of our incredible episodes with guests from all walks of life, celebrity friends, and so much more. So the YouTube channel is the one you're watching right now, Jim Masters TV. Click that notification bell and that red button you just saw that says subscribe. We would love it. There's no cost for that. Just lets us know you love what we're doing here and all the work behind the scenes to bring you all this entertainment and information with the Jim Master Show Live. And also give this episode a like as well. We would love that. That is really awesome. And leave a comment on a YouTube channel as well. Yes, joining us again from Los Angeles for more than 3 decades, Grammy and Emmy nominated guitarist, composer, producer David Becker has continued to define himself as one of the best and most unique voices in jazz and contemporary music by combining diverse influences and a passion for the new and different. And his ability to play for the present while always keeping an eye on the past and the future is his claim to fame. He has led the critically acclaimed David Becker Tribune to a worldwide audience by performing in more than 35 countries. And over the years, David Becker Tribune has shared the stage with such celebrated jazz acts as Miles Davis, Chick Corea, Michael Brecker, and many, many more. Really incredible. German television, matter of fact, they said he's one of the best jazz guitarists ever. And Jazz Podium and Downbeat called him a poet on the jazz guitar. Jazz Thing and Guitar also and bass called him a virtuoso. And David has released 17 recordings, many topping the jazz and contemporary music charts. And he's performed at some of the most prestigious venues throughout the entire globe. And he'll, of course, many international jazz festivals he's performing, including the Monterey Jazz Festival as well. And we're so excited to have him here because we've got a lot of good music for you and just great conversation. And you're going to learn something. You're going to be entertained. We're going to put a smile on your face and everything else we do. Do you know that he also has composed music that is heard on the Weather Channel, Voice of America, RTL, ARD, XM Sirius Radio, NPR, which is National Public Radio as well. Brilliant musicianship, really lovely album, of course, Leaving Argentina. We're so excited to have him here. We're going to talk about some of the great albums over the years that he has created and composed. Lots of comments coming in. Again, I see a lot of comments here. Welcome, everybody. It's so good to see you and you and you and you. We hope you're having a good day. If you're not, hey, we're going to put a smile on your face right now as we do welcome a legend in the industry and somebody who loves what he does. Our friend David Becker is joining us here. He's all poised in his studio with his guitar. And there he is. Welcome, David, to the Jim Master Show Live. It's awesome to have you here.
Hey, Jim. Glad to be here.
So you got your guitar. You're all set and ready to go. Tell us, how have you been during this crazy time that we've all been experiencing? You know, it's a time for teachable moments, a time to learn, and a time to stay connected and collaborative and creative. How have you been during all this time?
Well, it's interesting because the pandemic sort of forced everybody to kind of soul search about what do we do now. But musicians have always had this thing like you have to deal with each moment and make decisions really on the fly as to what you're going to do, especially when you're improvising and you're doing things. And of course, that leads to the whole idea that, so we're stuck in this pandemic, you can still be creative. And I made sure that I spent a lot of time in this room doing a lot of online things, writing new music. I wrote an etudes book, which I released last year, called Etudes You Can Use. I did several online concerts. Of course, I had private lessons with guys all over the world, recorded new music, wrote new music, and just tried to stay creative, because I think that's the whole point, is that, regardless of whether I'm playing in this little room here for myself, the audience member, or I'm playing a concert for 1,000 people, I don't differentiate that. So the idea of keeping the creative juices flowing is so important, I think.
Absolutely. Lori is here as well. I recognize that name. She says, hi, everybody. Good to see you, Lori, and a pleasure to have you here as well. And everybody that's watching around the world. You come from the Midwest, right? You grew up in the Midwest. What were some of those early influences for you? Maybe either within the family or just in the area where you grew up. Is it the greater Cincinnati area?
Well, I was born in Cincinnati. My dad was from Cleveland, and my
Cleveland,
mom
yeah.
is from the Netherlands. She was born in
Ah,
Indonesia. And then that's another story which will tie into a project that I have. But
yeah.
she grew up in the Netherlands and met my dad there. So he came back to the Midwest and had my brothers and I was the last of the bunch. There's three of us. And I was in Cincinnati. So the first 2 years I lived in Cincinnati, and then I lived 2.5 years in Detroit, and then 2.5 years in Southern California, and then a year in Chicago. And then we came back to Woodland Hills when I was 8. So up until that point, I had lived in several cities, but also I traveled to Europe extensively, because my mom being Dutch and my dad worked for the airlines, we would go to Europe every year for a month. And I started my first trip at 2.
Did you
And
really?
so by the time I was 8 or 9, I'd been there 9 or 10 times. And it
Mm.
was a great experience, because they took us out of school because we wouldn't go during the summer vacations. And I guess my parents somehow talked to the principal and said, we're taking our boys to Europe. So they gave us homework to do. I don't remember if we ever did it. We had a great education traveling around. And my grandfather lived in the Netherlands, and we had cousins in Germany. So my dad loved Austria. So we just piled into a VW. I'd sit in the way back because I was so small. And he'd drive us all over the place. And his whole mission was to find places that were not on the main map.
Yeah.
First of all, for his work, because he worked for the airlines, to try to find new cities or little towns that he could sell to tourist guys, but also just for us to experience. And I didn't know anything else. So it was a great experience. And my brothers and I sort of were left amongst ourselves for that month. And when you would go over there and come back to the States, man, culture shock was really a major thing that you would deal with, because first of all, the automobiles were totally different in Europe. They were much smaller,
Yeah.
and the culture was different. So you had to get adjusted to that. And I think growing up with that gave me sort of the beginnings of wanting to do what I do and have been doing for the last 40 years, which is traveling around playing music.
Who were some of the influences for you earlier in your life, as far as some of the other musicians and performers and composers out there that you really took a liking to early on?
Well, the thing is, my oldest brother played classical piano when he was young. So we had piano around the house, and then we
Yeah.
got a guitar, and then I played drums, and then somehow I switched to trumpet, and then later guitar. So we had all this music going on. My parents had classical records that I used to listen to. One of the first albums that was probably a very big influence on me was from Edvard Grieg, the Piano Concerto in A minor. And then, of course, we were Monkees fans and
Oh,
Beatles
yeah.
fans, and we had all the top 40 hits of the day, bought little 45s. I remember the first album I bought was from a band called El Chicano, which is a
Hmm.
group from out here. They had a hit with an instrumental piece called Viva Tirada, which is from Gerald Wilson. I didn't know it at the time, but the guitar player had sort of a Wes Montgomery influence, which I discovered later. And then, my brother had Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin records when they came out. So I was exposed to that at an early age. And then playing trumpet, I had the influence of big band like Buddy Rich and Louis
Yeah.
Bellson and all that stuff. So that sort of combined with the the Hendrix and the Zeppelin, and then of course whatever the rock was of the day, like Bad Company and all that stuff. And then I started to listen to, more jazz stuff like Chick Corea and things like that. And then I heard Grant Green.
Yeah.
Made me want to get a jazz guitar, and then I haven't looked back since. I mean, I love all kinds of music. I certainly, had a period where I was a jazz snob. I think every jazz guy has to go through that. But then I rediscovered all the other music that was important to me. And still to this day, I look at all aspects of those early influences, like listening to Led Zeppelin 2 when I was 8 and not knowing what it was, but not really defining it as anything other than music.
You mentioned the incomparable Buddy Rich. I tell you, he was something else, wasn't he? Oh, boy.
Absolutely. Well, we had another thing too, is that I had a great music teacher in junior high, Ted Dector, who sadly passed away a while back. But he had the ability to take kids, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids and make a band out of us. And he felt that it wasn't the individuals, but it was the sum of the parts. And some of the guys who went through that program are guys like my buddy Mark Schulman, who I've known since I was 7, who plays with Pink and Foreigner. And then a lot of other people who went through that program, went on to do things like play for Philharmonics and things like that. And even the people that didn't go on to be professional musicians really related to that period of life, that it gave them skills that they could use in other parts of their life. And I think that was important. Plus, we had a music store which was owned by Terry Gibbs, the vibist, and Mel Zelnick, a drummer who played with Benny Goodman. So they used to bring in like Buddy or Louis Bellson to play the parking lot, when they had a day off, and the kids would stand out there and watch them play. So that was a great environment for us to just be exposed to different things.
Remember, of course, the late great Maynard Ferguson.
Sure.
Another. I was just watching some videos. I was always familiar with him, but just watching again some of the videos on him, he was extraordinary, huh?
Yeah, and being a trumpet player, I was a Maynard fan. And then later on, when the DBT was out recording our second record, Siberian Express, we actually ended up working with Maynard's people, his manager and his booking agency. So we got to know those guys very well.
Really incredible stuff. So early on for you, what was an initial opportunity that you would say was a door opening opportunity for you? Was it when it was with the Tribune, or was it you singularly? Tell us a little bit about one of those pivotal moments early on for you that sort of got the ball rolling for the career.
Well, I say this: when I graduated GIT, which is Guitar Institute of Technology, which is now known as Musicians Institute, it is a school out here in Hollywood that when I went there, I was the youngest guy. I was 18. And most of the guys that went there were like 23, 24. They had gone to Berkeley or North Texas State or Miami University. And I had actually applied to Berkeley and I got accepted. But I met a couple of guys who said, no, you should go to GIT because it's much smaller and they've got great instructors. And so I did that. And after I left that, my whole mission was I wanted to go and basically have a band with my brother on drums and write music and record. And of course, there's no manual to do that. Today, the internet allows you to do things that you couldn't do 40 years ago. But for me, it was like, how do I get from Woodland Hills to, play music around the globe? And I started making demos in my garage on a 4-track and put the band together with myself, my brother, and a bass player that actually knew Chris Martin, who was C.F. Martin IV from Martin Guitars. And C.F. Martin opened the door for me to go and do clinics. So that was a great opportunity for me to go and play at NAMM shows and then do things around at music stores in different parts of the world. And that opened up some doors that allowed me to, once the band started working at a club in Venice, to go to put a tour together of Germany, which is what I did. So, there's a lot of things that kind of happened, but, a lot of it is that I always had the vision of what I wanted to do. And of course, realizing it is something different than doing it. But because I had guys that were willing to go and play with me and make that happen, we were able to get a substantial number of gigs in Germany in 1984 without a record. We had a little EP that we'd done at Warner Brothers, but it wasn't released to the public, just to radio. And that allowed us then to go and do a bunch of college dates. So we started from Germany, went on to the East Coast, and we worked all through the Northeast and Midwest and Southwest and Northwest for about 6 months. We must have done probably in the neighborhood of 100 gigs.
Mm.
And we had this little EP, and that kind of got us going. And then we were offered the ability to go in the studio and record a full album, which is another opportunity that I had. The guy was Chet Himes, who was running, which was Warner Brothers Studios, but it became Amigo Studios.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a 32-track digital machine, which I think the first album they did was Bop Till You Drop from Ry Cooder. And he offered us to go in for 4 or 5 days. It was the weekend of Live Aid, and record a full record. So we did that, and that eventually got in the hands of MCA Records, and the rest, as they say, is history. So
That's incredible, huh? And then, like you say, the ball really started rolling, and then all of a sudden,
yeah,
how did
that
they?
was on the map to go. But again, because we had toured, most
Yeah,
guys go to a city and play their hometown and hope to get discovered and go play somewhere else. For me, I knew initially that I wanted to go and play, in Europe or play around the globe. I didn't want to play the baked potato. I mean, I have played it since, and I mean, it's a great place, but I just didn't want to be the guy playing in Southern California. I had my sights set on something else. So the first gig we played in Germany was in Berlin, and they had played our stuff on the radio. And I mean, we're this unknown little trio from California. Man, it was packed.
yeah,
And it was amazing. And the response that we got, we were in one of the biggest newspapers in Munich, and we just had this reception, which, I mean, today with the internet, there's so many things you can do that back then, I had to send an actual physical copy of the record that I had. I had one copy to the radio station in Berlin and hope that it got there. And
right.
hope that I could get it back to me because I didn't have another copy. So,
Wow, that's amazing. I love that beautiful guitar that you're caressing and holding like a dear friend. Tell us about that beauty.
well, this is the original prototype of the David Becker Heritage. I'll take this off so you can see. It's a Heritage, which are the original Gibson guys in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I met them in 1987. I had an old Gibson 175, and I was looking to get a new archtop that would incorporate some of the aspects of the guitars I was playing from Martin guitars, the acoustic guitars. I spent a lot of time with Chris doing clinics, so I learned about acoustic guitars, but I still was a jazz guy and had the archtop. So they tried to make me one, Martin, but it didn't come out very good. So I met Heritage, and they said, we'll make you whatever you want. And they made this guitar, which became a signature model back in, I think, 2016. So there are about, as far as I know, there's about 12 David Beckers around the world. As far as I know, most of them are here, but there's a few over in Germany.
Yes.
And you can order this guitar still from Heritage, but you have to custom order it. So you have to say, I want a guitar like David Becker's. But it is essentially made for me. It's like a 575, but it has a thicker body, and it has an acoustic pickup and a humbucker.
It is a beautiful piece of gorgeous workmanship there. And we would love for you to maybe grace us with a treat or two.
Sure.
Do you have something you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I'll play a little blues for you. A couple of
Would
courses.
love it.
So.
All right. David Becker. That is fantastic. That is beautiful. I can listen to that for hours. Really, really nice, my friend. There's a very exciting project that you've been asked to be a part of, which I mean, congratulations. And it's with the Space Channel, too. Tell us about that. How did that happen for you? And what's some of your contributions to what they're doing at the incredible Space Channel?
Well, through a mutual friend, I met the founder of the Space Channel, Chad Mountain, and he was just putting it together when I met him. And I just mentioned to him, I said, "Hey, if you need any music for the Space Channel, let me know." And he said, "That's a great idea." So we met many times and we started talking about things. And they started off with using some recorded material from my catalog that there's some cool videos that they put together of stills and different, lapse time things that they've got from space and from the desert, whatever. And it's really cool. So we had different options of different things we talked about. And eventually we came on the idea of doing something on the planets. And I said, it might be an interesting thing for me to play something musical to describe the planets. But the idea from the get-go was to do it improvised. So we eventually got to the point, because of the pandemic, things got pushed back. They moved their headquarters down to Brownsville, Texas. And there's a really nice playhouse down there that was available for them to use. And the original idea was I was going to do a concert and then they'd film it and do this thing. But because of COVID, we couldn't have the full house. So we decided just to go down in the empty house. And I shot a whole day of the planets. I basically improvised for each planet just a musical motif. And that's what the series is. It's actually up now. I think the first couple of planets are there for you to see.
Yeah.
But the whole series will debut eventually in the next month or so, I guess. But just keep your eyes peeled on that. And of course, all the social media things I have, I'll make sure everybody knows when the full series is out.
That is an epic.
Yeah, great. And I mean, I'm anxious to go and do it live, because our next step is to go out and for me to perform in front of an audience. So we'll have some of the backdrop of the visuals, and I'll basically do the same thing and perform a concert and talk about my association, because music is really related to the universe. I mean, there's so much parallel to that you can actually equate a lot of musical things to how the universe works. And in that series, I talk about, conceptually how I see things. And I know other musicians that I've talked to have a similar outlook toward that. So it's not just me playing music, but I'm also talking about, the relationship of this with that. So.
That is very, very cool. Congratulations being a part of something really incredible, entertaining as well as informative too, and educational on so many different levels for all different generations. That is absolutely awesome. A lot of times people will say when they create art, they're doing it for the public, which is a great reason why people do what they do, to reach and touch and inspire others, connect with others, entertain, sort of lighten the load for everybody else. Um, but you also are very in tune, not only with doing that, but also um, pr- creating art, creating music that speaks to the essence of who David Becker is as well. So if we're hearing something that you're playing, you're interpreting, that you've composed, what have you, the essence of who David Becker is completely being reflected in that piece of music, isn't it? You're really expressing yourself.
Well, yeah, that's a great topic to talk about because as a musician, you really have the I guess the responsibility to tell about yourself through the music. And what I mean by that is that each time I play, I'm trying to tell a story about who I am, but it reflects back not for me to try to play to an audience that I can only second guess. It's to play to me, the music fan. Because the reason I became a musician and the reason most people become musicians is because they're fans of music. So I have, as a music fan, a lot of things that I love. And when I play, I try to satisfy that, to say that, well, if I'm listening and I'm part of the audience, which I am, I want to satisfy that guy. And hopefully if I satisfy that guy with what he likes, which is me, it'll broaden it out to more people who kind of like that kind of thing. I mean, it's not going to resonate with everybody, but you can't second guess, because if you start to try to figure out what people like or don't like, you're lost. And you can talk to anybody from James Taylor to Miles Davis. Their whole thing is just to do what they do, and I think a lot of it is being the music fan while you're making the music. And the more you can tap into that, I think the more you'll be true to who it is you are as a person and a musician, and the more that will reflect to the audience that will recognize that. Because audiences are interesting because, I mean, I've played for so many audiences around the world. The one thing that I find is that the more I focus on just what I just said about satisfying me and the audience, the better response I get.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the only thing you can really count on, because, like I said, you can't second guess. You can't try to do something that you think someone's going to like. But I also think, too, with the kind of music that somebody chooses to do, and I don't like to use the word style. Style to me is like clothing. I think of dialects like languages. And I think there are many, many dialects. I just did a recording project with the drummer Chris Bowman and a former bassist from the DBT, Jim Donica, and it's all improvised. We just studio and just played for 3 hours. Everything is improvised, and it's very interesting music. But that said, if I compare that to something that's totally composed, it's the same thing for me. The idea when I go in to make music is to try to keep that aesthetic of what I have as far as the people that I admire, the level that they brought to the fold, as far as saying this is the level you want to achieve, and these are the things you need to be aware of, dynamics and all these different things. I try to keep that in everything I do. And if that's not a part of the music, then it's not good music. And so what I mean by that is when you play for people, whether you're doing something totally improvised, you're doing something completely sort of, in the pocket of nice composed music, it still has to have that thing to resonate. And I have seen with my own performances that when I play stuff that's considered a little bit, whatever, avant-garde or whatever you want to call it, people respond because I'm trying to make them understand what's going on. It's not about, playing something that's over their heads. I take people on a journey, and I'm part of that journey. So if I'm not satisfying me with that, I'm going to try to find a way to do that. And it's hard. To do that night after night is
right.
It takes a lot of concentration. It takes a lot of practice, and not practice and just practicing your instrument, but just going out and doing it. So about the early opportunities. I mean, there were gigs that I had. One of the first gigs that I had that was a major gig was I got called on a Wednesday and said, can you play Saturday opening for Miles Davis solo? And I'm like, well, yes. I didn't hesitate. And I hesitated because it would scare me to death if I thought about it. I said yes because I was willing to take the challenge. And I mean, I got up there in front of, I don't know, 20,000 people at this festival and performed for 30 minutes. And as I remember, I got a good reception. But I just said, I'm going to do this, regardless of what happens. But if I had thought too much about it and tried to figure out what am I going to do to make them like me or like what I do,
Exactly.
it would have been lost. So that was a good lesson for me then. And of course, as the years have gone on, I've learned how to adapt when things go, left. And, art is not perfect. And I tell students that one thing that is interesting is in Florence, we have the statue of the David. And that's supposed to be the vision of the perfect man.
Mm-hmm.
Go and see that. The hands are too big for the body. And Michelangelo did that for a reason, to accentuate the hands, because the detail's incredible. So when you walk in and you see it, you don't notice the hands are too big. If you know it, you'll notice it later, but it's just to accentuate that. So, of course, the imperfections are part of the perfect things in art. And those are things that you have to learn, on the fly. You have to be on the bandstand or on the stage and have something happen where you've got to deal with that thing. And that prepares you to be able to do what you do.
What inspires you to do what you do? What are some of the things that inspire you on a day-to-day basis? Are you, I often ask because I tend to be one myself. Are you an observer of people and life and nature and things that are happening around you? And do you
Yes.
sort of soak that up and sort of file it? And when you do, we had the incredible Melissa Manchester on as a guest, and she was talking about some of the things when those inspirational moments come, what she needs to immediately do when that happens, because it can happen at any moment. Even if she's waking up out of a sleep, she immediately has to run to the piano and press record on the recorder, and whatever is flowing through her as a facilitator, as a conduit, she's capturing as it's coming out of her body, her fingers, and recording it, because the further away you are from that inspiration, the more it's diluted. How about you? What inspires you? Some things that inspire you, and do you try to capture that inspiration as quickly as you can?
Well, the main thing for me is that I love music, and I could play 12 hours a day and really satisfy that little fan in me.
Yeah.
And when I play the guitar, you can't take it out of my hands. I mean, I start playing because I enjoy it. But for the inspiration thing is, I travel a great deal and have traveled a great deal. And I grew up with different languages and I speak several languages. So I'm always interested to listen to people speak and conversations in foreign languages and just watch people, how they interact. I also like the surroundings of certain places, but it's not so much that I go out into the desert and say, okay, now I'm inspired to write a tune. It's more about that I'll have an idea and I just try to follow that. And as you said with Melissa Manchester, I have had situations where I woke up and a whole song was there and I had to sit down and make sure that I wrote it down or played it, that I didn't forget it. Because it's one of those things that you go, okay. I mean, James Taylor talks about that we're just the conduit, that this thing comes to us and we're the vehicle to get it out. And it's the same thing with improvisation. Improvisation is spontaneous composition. So there are tools that we have available to us in our vocabulary that we need to use, because it's like speaking. If you do some kind of motivational speaking and you go every night and you talk to different people, you're going to have an introduction, you're going to have a middle part, you're going to have an end. And that may vary as far as the sentence structure night to night, but the ideas are going to be there. It's the same thing when you're improvising. You have these ideas that you carry with you in each individual piece of music, and you try to keep those, cohesive so that you're able to communicate. And that's really what it's all about. It's not about, finding new things every night. But what does happen, though, is that you have these moments where something new comes into view that you go, wow, I hadn't looked at it that way before. And
Mm.
that's what keeps me wanting to know more about music and about the guitar. I mean, I've playing guitar for over 40 years,
Right.
music since I was a little kid, but I'm learning more and more every day. And when I do lessons with my students or I do workshops, I get these inspirations on a regular basis. That's why I wrote that Etudes book, because the pandemic hit and I just started playing these things, and my students said, well, what are you doing? Well, here's a new etude. And then I ended up writing 25. So I could have written probably 50 more, and I probably
Yeah.
will. So it's a constant desire to get better at what I do and understand more about what's going on. Because when I was a kid and had only played, like 4 or 5 years, I was pretty advanced for certain things. And I look at things I did back then, and I'm like, how did I come up with that? That's something I would never come up with now. But there's a certain amount of naivete that you have, that you're able to find that creative source. But as you get older and you learn more about how you sound, what your voice sounds like, to recognize you. Because in the beginning, when you're trying to learn a musical instrument, you imitate, which means you hear things and you try to do what that person is doing. Then you assimilate, kind of make it your own, and then you innovate. But as you get to the point when you've been doing it a long time, you have to constantly recognize your own voice so that you can recognize the things you hear in your head and be able to reproduce those things on the fly. And that's a hard place to get to, but to remind yourself of that constantly is important. So I'm always, when I see, because of YouTube and all that, I mean, you see yourself perform more than you really want to sometimes.
Yeah.
To really find out, am I really hitting what I'm trying to hit? Is it really
Right.
connecting? Does that do this? And you get to the point when in real time, you can sort of do that. You can find yourself, 80 to 90%. And if you talk to any musician who does it on a regular basis, they'll say the same thing. I mean, someone like Pat Metheny would say, he keeps a journal. In fact, I know he does every night. He writes down, maybe it's in his laptop, but about how he felt, about how he played, and the other guys and all that stuff. And he's been doing that for years. And it's important
Yes.
for him to do because it keeps him from getting stagnant, and he learns from each thing. For me, I don't do that, but I rely on a lot of the social media things and the YouTube videos that people post and things that I can see, to get a gauge of, well, is it really what I think it is when I'm doing it? Or is it, sometimes we're our worst critics, but when you step back, you're able to find the things that you do like. But the first thing you see is the thing you don't like. So you
Right.
have to recognize, well, this is what I do. This is how I sound. This is me. And be able to live with that.
Are you hard on yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm my worst critic. But what I've learned about that is that at some point you have to come to a place where you can agree that what you did in that moment was what was to be done. Meaning that, there's many things I can do, but when you decide to do something, that decision you make at that split second is going to influence the rest of what's happening. And all I'm trying to do is keep the flow going. So if I'm playing something like I just played the blues, right? So if I'm playing a line in the blues, and there's a dialect, obviously, that I have to follow, but as soon as I play the first line, I have to answer that. Or, if I start up here. I mean, I'm just listening like you are, and I'm hearing that line, and then it's inspiring me to do something else. But what I'm hearing, obviously, is whatever it is, 50 or whatever years of as a music fan, but then I'm also hearing 40 some odd years of David Becker's vocabulary, which is kind of all intertwined with the Miles Davises and the Jimi Hendrix stuff. So I'm at any given moment going to be able to hear something I recognize that I'm going to try to play. And that's hopefully going to resonate. So that's what's happening in that.
That's really fantastic. I love that explanation. You also, with Brad Rabuchin, had an opportunity to pay homage to this legendary
Yes.
gentleman.
Yeah.
Tell us about this really, really special project that you and Brad have worked on, and I know are incredibly proud of.
Well, I knew John. First of all, he was one of the first guitar players that I heard when I was a kid. My brother brought home Timeless, which is his first record. And obviously he was a guy that I knew, and then I became a fan of his playing, and then we met early on when I was studying, and then I became friends with him, and we ended up playing together, and then we worked on a project together, which is a tribute record for Attila Zoller, the Hungarian guitarist, who had a big influence on guys like Pat Metheny and was good friends with Ron Carter. So John and I had a relationship, and we were talking about doing more things, and then sadly John passed away. And when he passed, I was in Italy, and I wrote, just like this thing came to me, the tune that is the title track on the record for John. And I performed it that night in Italy at my concert. And then Brad and I have known each other forever. He came to the very first David Becker Tribune gig that we did back in Reseda, California in 1982. And we would play together whenever we could, and we would get together and do duets at NAMM shows and whatever. And we always said we should do a record together. And of course, you say that, and getting it done is sometimes hard because of our schedules. And I moved to Europe, and I lived there for a long time, so I only saw Brad very rarely. And we ultimately reconnected on a regular basis, and he said, we should do that record. And I said, you know what, let's do it. So because John had passed, and I knew I had some time in my schedule, I said, let's do a record and let's dedicate it to John Abercrombie. Mm. I have this piece I wrote for him, and then we did a couple of standards, and we did one of Brad's tunes, and then we improvised a bunch of things. But the things we improvised, we took little things that were sort of attributed to John Abercrombie. For instance, there's a tune called Crumbles, and that was his nickname in the band Dreams, which I think Randy Brecker gave him that name. And we did a tune that's called, As a Matter of Fact, We Were Trying to Make Money, which is a long story about the whole Timeless record, and just other quirky things. Because John had a really, really great sense of humor. He was really a lovely guy. And I mean, I'm still in touch with his wife, Lisa. She's a really wonderful lady. She's living up in the Bay Area now, where she's from. She and John were living back on the East Coast. And, John was one of those guys who, first of all, he had a great sense of humor, but he was an amazing musician, and he was just fun to be around. And the first time we played together, it was exactly like I imagined it would be, because the communication. Didn't have to say anything. We just started playing, and there was a great, communication. So we wanted to pay homage to John, and hopefully we did.
Absolutely. And I think we just showed the cover to that album. It's this one here, right?
Yes.
For John.
Yeah, in fact, it just got re-released digitally worldwide on the Acoustic Music Records label, which is my record label in Germany. Yeah. Oh, and they just put it out on the 14th of February, so you can get it. The CD copies are hard to get, but you can get the digital versions.
And there's you with Brad. Right. How long have you guys been working together?
Well, like I said, we've known each other for over 40 years.
40 years now, yeah.
Played together on and off, but this is the first project that we actually recorded. And we did the record probably in about 4 hours.
Did you really?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Do you have some more you want to share with us, my friend?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do something improvised. I'll do, I don't know, we'll call it the Jim Masters improvised piece.
These are.
I use a little card that has become known as a sound that I've developed on the guitar. So it's sort of a hybrid of a drum and a sitar. So we'll see what happens. We'll just start.
So basically, the master is performing for the masters.
Right. So we'll just see what goes on here. So.
That is awesome. I love that. Thank you very much, my friend. That was really, really cool. Yeah, it's got that sitar sound, like you said, that sort of Middle Eastern flavor and essence to it, huh?
Yeah, it's funny because I had played around with back in the Martin days when I used to do those workshops with Chris. Now, Chris, comes from a family that traditionally made guitars that essentially were for folk and bluegrass and, kind of the rock pop thing. And when he heard me play when I was just a kid, like 21, I was doing kind of the similar thing. I was using back then a delay pedal and sort of looping things and making up sounds on the guitar. He liked that because he didn't want the bluegrass guy to come out and play Rocky Mountain, whatever. He wanted me to do that. And so I had the opportunity to go around the world, and he would talk about the history of his family and the guitars, and I would play for 40 minutes. So I learned how to kind of do a lot of things like this. So I was experimenting around with a business card. And then when I was living in Germany, there was a copy store around the corner from me, and they had these cards, which are sort of like those cards you get at a parking lot where you put it in to pay and whatever. And I just put it in between the strings, and I went like, wow, that's a cool sound. So I went to the guy and said, so what do you do with those cards when they're empty? Because he would load them up to get copies made. He goes, I throw them away. Why? I said, I make music with them. And so the next time I came in the shop, he had a stack of them, and he said, here, musical instrument. So I took those, and, because the guitar has a piezo pickup, which is acoustic pickup, I could get sort of a, and then also I can do the drums. And I've used it on a lot of recordings, and of course I do it live. So it's a sound, like I said earlier, you got to recognize what sounds and what vocabulary you have. This is part of the David Becker vocabulary, are these sounds. And I try to integrate them as best as possible into what I do.
Really, really cool. I want to show some photos we have here too. This is the actual Tribune, right? It's you
Yes.
guys doing your thing. And are you guys still doing it? Are you still touring together? How does that work for folks who are
Well,
learning about you?
yeah, my brother retired from touring
Yeah.
2 years ago because he's got young kids and he's doing a lot of online teaching. So I have in Europe the current bass player that's in that picture right now, Bola Diekman, who's been on probably, I guess, the last 4 or 5 DBT records, is still with me in the band. And then I have a drummer over there in Germany. And we did, before the pandemic, I actually did some concerts with them in Germany. And we have plans to do more. It's just a question of what's happening with the logistics of getting all the gigs back together.
Absolutely.
So, and I've been doing our solo concerts because that's allowed me to do this kind of thing with the loop. And it's kind of fun in a way where I can do a whole night of either solo guitar or I can add all these elements to it. So, whatever comes up is fine. I'm not too concerned, but the Tribune is still intact for the most part. So
you're still going.
Yeah.
I just want to show some of these covers of some of these incredible albums. This one, Leaving Argentina, and
that was shot by Bola out of the bus. We were traveling somewhere in the middle of Argentina, and he just shot out of the bus. And I gave it to the art director in Germany that does the covers, and he loved it, so he made it the cover.
And that was so incredibly well received too, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's one of our more popular records, Leaving Argentina.
Yeah, I think, is that the one that has been praised by the international press, Downbeat giving it 4 stars, and BBC said brilliant musicianship, a really lovely album.
He liked it a lot. In fact, a lot of the stuff on Leaving Argentina, you hear a lot on television.
I was going to say, being a television guy myself, you have a lot of stuff that's on television. It's aired on the Weather Channel and other places. Tell us about that. That's very cool.
Well, when I first started making records with MCA Records back in the day, their publishing company would service it to the different, TV stations. And I remember the first album, along Peter Mattson, they were using a little bumper on Entertainment Tonight, between the commercials. So obviously, because of that, each record that would come out, the guys that do the music for those things would know. And for some reason, they gravitated towards a lot of our stuff. And as the years went on, the Weather Channel had an interesting guy who was programming the music for the the local on the eights they called it. He was
Yes.
a jazz fan, so whenever a record would come out, I would make sure he got an advance copy. And one of the albums that we released back in the mid '90s, it's called Nevsky Prospect. It was only available in Europe for a long time, but that record became a huge hit on the
Yeah.
Weather Channel to the point where people would post videos
Yeah.
on YouTube of the segment with the tune, and I'd get these emails on my website. Hey, where can I get a copy of the record? And finally, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we finally got it released digitally worldwide because the owner of the record label, I've known him for a long time, but I hadn't seen him in a while. I saw him at a convention in Germany. I said, "Hey, Carsten, we should put this record out digitally." He's like, "Nope," and we did it within, he said, "No problem," within a couple of weeks. So it's
Yeah.
available as well. And then German TV has been really good to me. I see that a lot of my stuff from The Lonely Road or from different records you see on television all the time, just little 15 seconds here, 30 seconds there. So some people might recognize some of the sounds or the music. They may not know it's me. But, as a musician, as a composer, it's good income to have that as well. But it's also a compliment to the music in that, if somebody sees that it fits visually with
Yeah.
whatever it is they're doing, because I
Right.
can't really make a visual. For me, it has colors and different things in it when I'm making it, but I can't say, well, that's a sunset and that's this. Let other people make that decision.
I have several of my collection of those Weather Channel CDs that came out. They became collectibles, and there's incredible music on there, like you say, that they used when they were showing the local forecasts and other things. And there was that period where they were really concentrating on that, and that was a great venue to also discover new artists and new music and rediscover some of your favorites too,
Right.
through just hearing that during your weather report.
Well, the thing is that for some reason people gravitated towards that music, and there became this whole fan page that they set up. Because I got
Yes.
a letter or an email from the Weather Channel. Hey, we've got this fan group, and we'll get the emails from them, and we'll send them on to you, and you can respond if you want to. And that's how that started. So I'm grateful that that's there, and a lot of people found pieces of mine that they put up on YouTube. You can find, I don't even know how many there are on YouTube of these little shots of the Weather Channel, but there's
From the
quite a
Weather Channel, right?
few. And again,
Sirius XM as well, too.
yes, yeah, and we actually did the DBT. We did the very first series of live concerts from Sirius Radio in was it 2005, I want to say, or 2004 in New York. We had just released the record "Where's Henning," and we got an invitation to go in the studio there. And I remember being in the middle of Manhattan in this building, like the 34th floor, and coming down the elevator. And I think it stopped 2 floors below, and this gentleman gets on in a suit, older guy, and he looks at myself and my brother and said, "Are you guys musicians?" And I said, "Yeah, there's a new satellite radio up there. We just did a concert for them." He goes, "Oh, great. Did you enjoy yourself?" I said, "It was great." He goes, "I'm the owner." I go, "Okay." So, but that's how that started. And, we used to get a lot of radio play on all the jazz stations back in the day, and still do to a certain degree. There's a station down at North Texas State that plays us quite a bit.
Yeah.
The NPR stations. But it's become less and less because when the conglomerate started eating up things and things got sort of morphed into whatever,
Yeah.
that outlet got less and less. But through the things like YouTube and through the Weather Channel and all these different things,
Right.
it pops up in different places that you would never expect. So
Yeah.
somehow it survives.
Absolutely. And long live it too, because it's great stuff. We have some more covers that I just want to show people. They're probably now going to start our lovely audience commenting. We encourage folks to comment live as you guys are doing in chat. And also, if you're enjoying this episode, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. Click that notification bell so you never miss any of our episodes. And also give this episode a like and also leave a comment on the YouTube channel as well. Here's another one.
That's Kiwi Dreams, yeah. That's the last recording that we did as the DBT. That's 2017, I think.
Yeah. What was that one about?
Well, We did a tour down in New Zealand, and
Yeah.
I went down before the band went down to do some promo stuff, and I did a
Yeah.
really long interview with the journalist down there. He's been one of the top journalists in New Zealand for
New
many,
Zealand.
many years. And we did a long talk, and he said, "Are you going to do anything special for the concerts?" And I said, "Well, I'll write a song for the Kiwis." So
Yeah.
I had to come up with something, and I came up with this piece of music called Kiwi Dreams, which the cover is actually a shot from a friend of mine down there who's a photographer.
Very
And
cool.
he's done many, many shots like that. And Alan was actually on tour with us, and the song went over really well, and we decided to record it and use that cover. So
There's another one.
that's The Lonely Road. Yeah, that's from one of my solo records from 2015, 2016. That's Distance Traveled.
What was that one about?
That one was, well, we had done Batavia, which is a really
Yeah.
heavy subject.
Yeah.
And the follow-up record was to basically go in the studio and record live. So it was just myself, my brother, and Bola playing basically tunes that we'd never played before. I wrote a whole bunch of tunes, and we rehearsed for a day because Bola flew in from Germany, and he was a
Yeah.
day late. So we did one rehearsal of new music, and then went in and recorded it, and that was it. Sometimes doing that, you get an interesting result.
Yeah.
We have done records where we've gone out on the road and played the music for a lengthy period of time to work it in and then go in the studio. But this was the opposite, and it was a fun recording to make.
Really, really cool. Here's another.
That's Where's Henning.
What's that one about?
Um,
Our audience is going to be digging for these.
that one was a record that we did with Tom Lilly, who is currently playing with Beth Hart. And
Mhm.
Tom was a member of the DBT. Back in the early days, he's on In Motion, and
Yeah.
he's on Jamaica, and he's on this record. And we had not played together in quite a while. We did a tour with him, and we were just hanging out in LA, and we decided to go in the studio and just record some standards because we'd never done that. So we did primarily a lot of standards like Green Dolphin Street and All Blues and things like that. And then we did a couple of my tunes that I just written real quickly to do. And it came out nice. It's one of those things that, we did it in a couple of days, and the musical forces were with us on those recordings. So it came out really nice.
Now, you mentioned instruction and teaching too, which I think is a really cool thing, paying it forward and your expertise being paid forward. Tell us about that, David.
Well, early on, that music store I talked about, the Music Stop, I took
Yeah.
lessons there when I first started playing guitar. I got my first trumpet there. I started to teach when I was in my late teens. And, you teach for half an hour for whatever. And it dawned on me that, music education is important too because of the education I had. So as I got more involved in being a professional musician and performing concerts and things like that, people would ask me, do you do workshops? And I said, sure. I wasn't that adept at it, but because I had done the clinics with Chris Martin, I had a good idea of how to do that. There are some guys, that's what they did from the onset. For me, it was it morphed into that. And I started to get more involved in education. I did some teaching at a school in Vienna. I had never written a book before, and I had an idea for a book that, because a lot of guys at my workshop said, do you have a book on that concept? And I said, no. I said, you should write one. So I met the guys from Mel Bay, and I said, I have this idea for a book. And one of the interviews I did in the Guitar Magazine, I wrote a little workshop for them, and they liked it. So they said, go ahead and do the book. And it's one of the best-selling books I have. It's called Getting Your Improvising into Shape. And that book still sells quite well. It's a book I can go back to and learn a lot from. But, it's just for me, when I write material to teach or I do lessons, I'm learning too. And
Yes, right.
I have these epiphanies where I go, okay, I never saw that like that before. And it's always good to share with my students to say, this is how I approach this, and and basically give them the nuts and bolts, but also not just the notes to play, but also the philosophies and how to play.
Exactly.
Because there isn't a lot of that. When you go to music school, a lot of it is, the theoretical stuff, and you play this and you play that. But how do you do that? And how do you actually maneuver? What are the things that are important? Because, when you're a musician, a good portion of your time is not playing music.
Right.
And how do you get to the gig? How do you travel? What are the hotels like? And those are things that you have to learn by doing. And I realized, I guess I was lucky, when we were touring around back in the early days, when I was like 22, we were in a little van, a Volkswagen van. We would drive 19, 20 hours to get to a gig, play, tear down, get in the van, drive another 10 hours and go do another gig. And we had this really heavy schedule, but I realized, I remember driving through the middle of Illinois or something at 5 a.m, that this is what it's like to be on the road. It doesn't matter if you're in a tour bus or you're in a Learjet or you're playing with the most famous person in the world or the least known person. This is what it's like to be on the road. The dynamic is only being inside that mechanism. Everything else is relative. So if you're on a big tour with like Sting, it really is the same as being on a small tour with your friends doing your thing. There are things about it that you have to deal with. And I learned that a long time ago to sort of internalize that and figure out how that thing works, because that's a big part of it. Because there's some guys who never get a chance to tour. They want to. They'll go play a gig at the same club. We were lucky because in the first years of the DBT, we had a steady gig in Venice Beach, a club that was owned by a German guy who said, "I don't want you to play any cover tunes." And I said, "Well, we basically don't." So we got to do our thing. And back then I was playing a violin and I was playing a harp and I played the trumpet and the guitar and was experimenting with all these different things, which later gave me the tools to do what I'm doing now. And we could, we played every month, sometimes twice a month for a year. And then we went on the road. And that gave us a great understanding of how to do what we do. Because like I said earlier, you have to recognize how you sound. What is it that you do? And one of the ways that people discover that is sometimes by going in the studio and recording and listening back and going, is that what we sound like?
Right.
Is that really what's going on? And it's scary for a lot of people because it's not always what they think it is. But in reflection, it is. And you have to be able to come to terms with that to be able to grow and say, okay, that's where I started. Now I'm going to go up here and each time develop more. It's, you're still the same guy that you were when you were 20. But as you grow, you have these experiences that form you and add on to what you have. And some things that you learn are going to be left on the side of the road because they're trying to get you to a certain place. Other things will remain.
Right.
If you listen to me play, in fact, there is on YouTube, there is, I put it up on the little EP that we had done for Warner Brothers. There's a tune called Forward Motion. And I put a little video out of that with the original DBT. And that's an interesting tune, first of all. But if you listen to me play, I was probably 21.
Wow. You'll
hear things that you'll recognize that it's me. It's not like you go like, well, who is that? You'll know right away. And you'll hear things that I do, and there are things that I still do from that recording. And so that's a good thing to do is to understand that, when you record and when you go out and play, you've got to have a sense of, okay, what am I doing? How do I pace the set? How do I make sure that, I don't do the same kind of tune each time, or how do I get the flow to do this? Because for me as an audience partaker in music, I always like to see something that has a lot of peaks and valleys, that keeps my attention, that I want more. And so when I do a set, whether it's for the DBT or it's for the solo gig or whatever, I think about that. I give a lot of thought to, and I have always done that. How do we start the set? Make sure that we know what we're going to play, make sure that we do segues. I'll talk to the audience at certain points to talk about things and tell stories about the tune so people are in the whole loop, because the audience is an integral part of that. If they're not there with you, if you're just kind of playing and you're ignoring their presence, you're not doing your job.
Right, exactly.
Playing for me, the fan. So me, the fan, is part of that audience. I'm sitting in the fourth row or the seventh row, whatever. But still that feel that you get when you play in an empty house, you do the sound check, you don't get a lot of feedback, But when the audience is there, man, you can feel them. And that first gig we did in Berlin back in '84, we couldn't see the audience. We thought there was only 5 people in the room. And we played the first tune, man. And when we finished, I heard this loud applause, and I thought, my God, how many people are here? And I looked out like this because there's smoke and it's dark, and it was packed. So you could feel that, but I didn't know, so that's the thing. And when you play for larger audiences, like when you play big festivals for thousands of people, you can still play the intimate thing and try to reach that guy in the 75th row. In fact, I got a great compliment from a guy that worked for Chick Corea after that gig I did for opening for Miles, because Chick was on the bill too. And he said, of all the people who play today, and we're talking about Miles Davis, Chick Corea's band, Jack DeJohnette's band, Steps Ahead, and myself, he said, you communicated the best. You with your little guitar, you were playing to the guy in the 175th row, and people could feel that. And I was like, I was kind of like, well, that's a nice compliment. I was very humbled, but I took that to heart, and I thought about it a lot, after the fact, and I went, okay, I obviously tapped into something that I need to try to keep, and that's why I said that was an important gig for me.
Absolutely. Who are some of the composers that inspire you as well? I think I did a little digging. Henry Mancini is actually on that list.
Yeah, Henry, I love Henry's tunes. I mean, he wrote some incredible pieces of music. I recorded The Days of Wine and Roses, but, he did the Pink Panther, and I played the Pink Panther in the jazz band in 9th grade, and I had solo. So, that goes way back. Other composers that were important to me, obviously Edvard Grieg, because of when I was a kid, conducting to the Tinker Toys thing and trying to understand what music was at age 4 or 5. But as I got more into music as a fan, the Monkees and the Beatles and things like that, and of course Led Zeppelin and that kind of rock and roll, but also the jazz guys, Miles Davis and John Coltrane. And then I got very influenced on a lot of guys that were of that generation after the bebop guys. Like there's a bass player from Germany, Eberhard Weber, who I love his music, and I'm a huge fan. And I got introduced to his music through one of the instructors at GIT, who said, you have to listen to this record laying on the floor with the lights turned off. And he played this record later that evening, which I found out later was actually the following morning. I found out that was a huge influence on Pat Metheny and Lyle Mays. And I got to know Lyle Mays a little bit. I know Pat, known him for many years, but Lyle and I talked about Eberhard every time we saw each other. In fact, the last project he did before he passed was called Eberhard. Yeah. And I know he was in not great shape physically, but he managed to put together, I haven't bought the record yet, but I'm going to. I've heard it, and it's amazing. And, classical guys, Sting, stuff that he's written, James Taylor. Paul Simon. I mean, anybody who's of any significance, Carole King, any of those composers and songwriters that had something to say, I've learned something from them. And a lot of the standard composers, that most people don't know their names, but Victor Young and Jerome Kern, they've got a huge book of tunes, Gershwin's, because those tunes, they're called standards, but they were popular pieces of the day. And they're still around today because they're such great pieces of music. And those guys could write not only a popular tune of the day, but they could write a symphony. So they used to sit around in New York in these penthouses and play songs for each other and say, hey, check this out. I wrote this and I wrote that, and learn from one another. And, composition was always, for me, the most important thing in music. It wasn't to be a great soloist.
What about somebody like a Marvin Hamlish?
Yeah, I mean, Marvin Hamlish wrote some great stuff for Broadway, and even Barry Manilow, and those guys, those arrangers. Even what's the guy that wrote "We've Only Just Begun"?
Yeah.
We'll come up with his name in a minute. But,
Paul Williams.
Paul Williams, yeah. So I love the Carpenters, and they had great arrangements. They had great harmonies. They had great things. I always was paying attention to that because as a kid, we'd listen to Monkey records, and I didn't realize how they wrote songs. Michael Nesmith wrote great songs, but also Carole King and Jerry Goffin and all these people wrote tunes that were really interesting tunes. They weren't just, the standard pop tunes. They had some really interesting little twists to them, which if you listen to them today, it's amazing the catalog they had, the Monkees.
Yes. One of our viewers asked if, I think it's Merlin in Canada, Les Paul, an idol of yours.
Sure. Les was more of an influence from the standpoint of the looping thing, because Les was the first guy who did overdubs. And I remember I had a Les Paul record, Les Paul and Mary Ford, and he had 25 guitars on this one track of How High the Moon. But, his influence was that ability to play something like, and then I would play something on top. So that's the Les Paul influence, is that layering thing. And he was the guy that invented multi-tracking. And I bought a 4-track when I was 16, one of those reel-to-reel TX, and played with that thing, all day. I never was interested in becoming like a recording engineer, but I knew enough about how to do overdubs and things like that it served the purpose for me. In fact, I still don't like to record myself. I like to go in with an engineer, because I can tell him, even if I produce things for people, which I've done, I'd rather have a guy that knows, do this, and I'll tell him what to do, because I know how to do the things. I just, it's tedious to do the actual engineering. And I've worked with some great engineers over the years, too.
Something else you'd like to tickle us with, my friend?
Sure. I'll improvise something else.
I tell you.
What happens when I play. So.
Cool stuff. We love it. That's fantastic. I love that. Do you love improvising? Do you love just doing it and seeing where it takes you?
Yeah, a lot of the compositions I come up with are from improvised things. And improvising, I'll sit and just play standards too.
Yeah.
And improvise over those to better my understanding. Because one of the things, like I said earlier, is recognizing what is it that you do when you play over this piece of music? How
Hmm.
does that chord change or that particular cadence affect how you perceive it? And how do you address it? Because that's what you're doing. You're addressing the tune. Like if I'm playing over a set of chord changes, I have to say, okay, that's an A minor, that's this chord. Not so much with words or like, notes, but to say, this is the sound, check out that color, listen to this. This goes to this now. To describe it in a way where, musically you can understand it, and not just the musician, but the audience. It's my job to do that. And so the first thing I'm going to do when I play is listen for things, and hopefully that'll resonate for me, the listener or the fan, that's going to be able to tell the musician, okay, this is the direction you need to go. And then when I write something, I have the luxury of doing it in step time, that I can sit down and go, okay, maybe I should change that note to this. But just sitting down and letting something go improvisationally is a great way to test yourself to see what you can do. And the minute something is played, the minute I play something, if I take the loop pedal and I go, I hear that. And something else comes out because it inspires something else, and that develops and something goes on top of it.
It's like a layering. Yeah.
At some point, we have to kind of know where to kind of stop or to keep it interesting. And that's always a challenge. But what I found is that I'm very cognizant of dynamics when I do the things I do when I'm looping. So I think about each instrument. Like when I did the thing earlier with the EBow,
Yeah.
because it's got this drony sound like a violin, I have
Right.
to make sure it's not too loud. So I'm going to start off dynamically and think about, okay, so where does it overall over the sound I'm playing right now? And I'm just playing through a small amp. When I do the concerts, I go through the PA, but still even in that situation, like on the Space Channel thing on the Planets episode, I was going through the whole system of the house. So
Right.
I had a great guy mixing it, which was really cool. So it was surrounding me all over the place, but I still had to be aware of how does each part, intertwine and become the sum and not the main thing. And that's a challenge, but after doing it for such a long period of time, I think I've gotten pretty good at it. And, I'm only trying to refine it each time. So
The Space Channel is actually watching us. We welcome them, and they had said, I guess things are premiering next week, which is exciting.
great. Good to hear. Great.
Yeah. They chimed. They got the Space Channel watching the Jim Master Show live. What was the feeling like when you realized you got a Grammy nomination, and of course you got the Emmy nomination? Let our audience know what they were for, and what were those feelings like to know you've been acknowledged by your peers in such an illustrious way?
Well, the first one was back with an early record, and those are the days when you didn't have much control over either getting tickets to go to the Grammys, and we knew that it was on the ballots because Ken Calais told me and said, I voted for you. It's an honor, but same thing with the Emmy. I did this piece of music for actually a commercial that was nominated for an Emmy. I didn't even know until a year and a half later. And I've been on several, records that have been nominated. Besides myself, I did one with Colby Calais that was nominated for a Grammy. And
What was the commercial?
Yeah, and a lot of stuff got submitted for Grammys. The thing is that the awards themselves, I go back to the 9th grade. I won the Outstanding Achievement Award at Hale Junior High for music. And my brother had told me, you should try to do this, 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 and this, and this, and then you'll win the music award. Kind of laid out sort of this thing. And I did it, and I remember getting the award. But I remember standing on the stage, my parents and all these people applauding, thinking to myself, well, this is just the beginning. This is great that I achieved this, but this is not the end all. It's the same thing when I made the first record. It wasn't like, okay, so now I can go to Tower Records and see that I have a bin and my name is on there, and I can, gloat or whatever. In fact, an interesting story is I was in Tower Records in Van Nuys, California, back in 1987 or 86 when Long Peter Madsen came out. And I just was looking at records, not my own record, but I went to go pay for something, and the guy behind the counter said, actually, I think I was standing next to Al Jarreau. I didn't realize, but he was there. And someone started talking to Al, and they said, "Well, you have two celebrities here." And he looked at me, and goes, "You have a record, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I have a record." And the guy behind the counter looked at me and said, "Oh man, you got a record? I have a band, and we're gonna get signed." And blah blah blah. Well, it turned out to be Janie Lane of Warrant, and so,
Wow.
and he invited me to his gig, which I didn't go to, but I happened to see the band by some circumstances later on. But the point was, I just said, he goes, "We've been working for years, and we finally got to get a record deal." And I said, "Well, the work begins as soon as you get the record deal."
Yeah.
And that goes back to your question about the nominations and the awards and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Sure, it's great to have the accolades, and I'm very appreciative of any accolades I achieve, but it makes me want to play better. And I don't want to focus on, well, now I got 4 stars from Downbeat, because the thing that happens is that if you have success, like we had a #1 record, okay, in the R&R charts,
Right.
and when the next record comes out, if it doesn't achieve that, you kind of feel like, oh, wow, what happened? We didn't have that this time.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't look at it that way, because if you do, you're going to be chasing after something that's elusive. And you just have to be content with what it is. So if you get the opportunity to have a nomination, or you win a Grammy, or you win an Emmy, or you whatever, you get this thing or you get that thing, you can say, wow, that's really cool. But everything else that you do is more important than that thing.
Yeah.
The recognition is nice, and I appreciate it all, and all the things that people say about me. When I read it, I go, okay, that's very nice, but I don't live and die by that.
No, right. That's not why you're doing what you
Yeah.
do.
And sometimes I told Jody Oreo once, I said, sometimes when I read stuff about, what people say in the newspapers and I play a gig, I want to give people their money back if I play crummy. It's like, I want to make sure I play really, really good every
You
time.
want to
Because
really,
that's the whole thing. And I'm very fortunate that I'm still around doing what I'm doing, and found a way to keep doing this, because it's a very difficult business to be in.
yes, it is. Yes.
The fact that people around the globe know my music, and that was the goal back then when I was 18. I told Pat Hicks from GIT, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I was sitting at his desk. I remember vividly, he gave me my audition to the school. He said, "What do you want to do, kid?" And I said, "Well, to be honest, I want to make records and become a known jazz guitar player and tour the world." And he said, "Now, don't let this go to your head." But he said, "I think you're going to make it." Now, of course, when he said that to me, I took it in stride. I went like, well, okay, that's nice that he says that. He's just trying to, give me encouragement. But I always remembered that was like, okay, because he said that, I had to do the work. It wasn't like it was a given that you're going to do that. And that's the thing that a lot of kids don't realize. When you go to a music school, it's not going to make you anything more than you're going to make yourself. You have to take the opportunities that you have, and you've got to be prepared. It's like being prepared for something. And like the thing with the jazz festival, can you play Saturday opening? If I had hesitated, there's no way I would have been able to do it. But you have to jump at it, and you have to be ready. So I think there's a saying about what success is. It's where preparedness meets opportunity.
Yes.
If you've done that work to prepare yourself, the opportunities come, and then it's like, okay, there you go. Now you got to do it. Because a lot of people don't suffer from failure or the lack of their belief that they're going to fail. They believe that they're going to succeed. So they trip themselves up, because success is more scary than failure. If that makes sense.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yeah.
I've seen that firsthand with a lot of people. And I always would tell people, there are things that are going to happen, and you're going to go like, wow, it's all over. I can't do this, or this is terrible. This is a terrible gig. And then something comes, like the gig we got in Venice. We had done a series of gigs, and we wanted to play this one club in Santa Monica so bad. And we got the night to play there, and it was a rainy Sunday night. We had a late slot. We all played crappy. I was really tired from being jet lagged from coming from Europe. And we just thought, it's over. And the next day I got a phone call from the come back in, and the guy said, "I love your music. I want you to play next week." So I was like, okay. So when you think, something's not happening, something else is going to come along. But you have to keep the tenacity and the motivation. It's like, you can't stop. You got to keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the same thing about why
I'm resilient. Yeah.
You love to do what you do, but you have to keep going, because there's always going to be some barrier, some little, stone in the road that's going to trip you up. and you got to be able to deal with that and get beyond that so you can continue. Because when you have a goal, which I had back when I was 18, that goal, as you get closer to it, gets further away.
Yes.
And that's good. It should keep going further and further away from where you are, because if you reached it and that was it, if it was like, I got to get a record deal, now I have a record at MCA, then that's it. So what are you going to do now?
I totally am in tune with what you're talking about. And I had a conversation with a friend who's unfortunately no longer with us, inventor, screenplay writer, just extraordinary person in New York. And we had a conversation about that. We had a really lengthy conversation. At that time, we were in our probably mid 20s, and we were talking about success. His career, my career in television and radio, his career wanting to be a writer and producer. And the conversation was about what happens if you do attain what you initially set up as total success. And
Exactly.
he said, which I got what he was talking about. He said, what happens if you go up the ladder, work hard, you get to that pinnacle in your mind of what you originally set up as success, and then that's it. You've done it. You've mastered it. You reached that top of what you have for years have been saying success is. And what if, number one, and most people say, oh, well, he's probably fearful that once you're at the top, you go down. That's not what his thought process was. It was, what if you reach the top and it doesn't match what you thought it was going to be?
Sure.
What if you've reached it and either it doesn't match or you've reached it? What's left after you've reached the pinnacle of the success that you've created in your mind? Sounds very similar to what you're talking about, which I find really fascinating.
Well, that's a good analogy, because I tell people when I do workshops and talk about the business side or getting your career together, I say success is completion, which means if you're going to write a song, write it. If you're going to record it. If you're going to release it, release it. If you're going to get a gig, get a gig. If you're going to make a tour, do the tour. Finish what you start. Because a lot of people say, oh, I'm still working on that, but I never finished it. Well, go do it. And when you do that, make a check. And that's success. Give yourself that, hey, I did something. I completed something. Now I'll go on to the next thing. Because like you said, that illusion of like, you get there and you're like, this is what it's supposed to be. This is it.
Right.
That's it. I mean, there are many things that happened to me over the years. I remember the first time I played in Russia, and we did this concert in Moscow for a sold out house. And years prior to that, I met somebody at the State Department doing the Voice of America. And he said, have you ever played in the Soviet Union? Would you like to play? I said, I'd love to. And he said, well, you can write your congressman and this blah, blah, blah. And I tried doing that. Nothing happened. And I was a little disappointed. But a couple of years later, there I was standing on the stage in Moscow going like, okay, so, it didn't happen then, but it happened now. So you always have to remember that the things that don't happen for you, if you stick to it and keep doing it, at some point, something will come along that will kind of do that, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. But you have to remember that it's just another step towards what you're trying to achieve. And you've got to be aware, like when I talked about being on the road as a kid and being in this bubble, understanding this is what it is. I still have that feeling to appreciate every time I get on a plane or I get in the car or whatever to go do a gig or do a tour. I'm very cognizant of it. I'm very appreciative of every single moment, from getting in to do the sound check. And even if I have 5 minutes in the hotel just to change and run over to the gig, do the sound check, I'm very appreciative. And I know that, everybody who does music would like to be able to do that, and not everybody can. So I count my blessings, and I'm every time going like, great to be still doing this,
It's all part of the journey.
Because if you lose that, you become jaded to what it is.
Yeah.
You start to become, sort of numb to what's going on. And a lot of guys that I know have had great gigs with very famous people. They hated it. They're like, I hated every minute of it. I couldn't wait to get to the hotel.
Right.
It's over, and they're like, well, wait, what happened? It's over.
Yeah.
Well, you could have had it, or so you have to do that. And the other thing is like, if something doesn't meet the level that you thought it would,
Yes.
you have to go back to the completion side and say, but I did this. I wanted
Yeah.
to do this. I got it in this form. Everything else beyond that is out of my hands. So whatever it does or doesn't do, I have no control, but at
Yeah.
least I got this.
Is this something you've had to learn along the way?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
Me too. Me too.
I was very fortunate to. I mean, I started out actually in the acting business when I was 10. I did some TV commercials, and I'll send you a link to one of them I found.
Yeah. Very
Um,
cool.
in Sports Camper, where I'm doing the narration and I'm the kid with the yellow sweatshirt. But I just stumbled into it. I did like maybe 10 national spots. Within a very short amount of time, I worked with Eddie Albert, I worked with
Oh,
Andy
yeah.
and Patrick Duffy. But then that dried up, and I didn't want to be an actor. But I learned a lot from that I didn't realize. Taking pictures and all this stuff, being on the set, things that I could apply to being a musician. So when you're doing things, you got to learn. It's like some people think, they're going to get a gig with some famous person like Sting, and then they're going to be famous, and it doesn't work like that. But you can learn from the process. You can watch, and you can say, okay, well, this works like this, and that does this, and hopefully I can find a way to do that. But you got to make the commitment.
Gotta make
If you don't make the
yeah.
commitment,
Yeah,
then
exactly.
it's not going to happen. And it might take you longer than you think. I mean, I was running around at 19 trying to get a record deal, and I almost had one with EMI when I was 19 in Holland, but didn't happen. But the guys were encouraging and said, "Come back and bring your band." They kept telling me, "Come back to Germany, bring your band," and I did. So,
The rest is history. Wow.
yeah, and,
What?
and I reflect back on those things too because a very important guy in my early development said something to me that makes a lot of sense. He said, "There's no accounting for personal taste," and that has been very important for me over the years. So I still keep that to heart.
That's so very, very true. Absolutely. If we were to check out your iPod or CD player, boombox, or your Onkyo stereo system with your big speakers and double cassette deck and turntable, like I still have, what would be in it? What music would be there? What do
Well,
you like to listen to? What's Zen for you?
I love to listen to anything from Eberhard still. I love to listen to Miles Davis, Wes Montgomery. I love to listen to the Monkees. I love to listen to the Beatles, Led Zeppelin. I love to listen to El Chicano. I love to listen to a lot of the pop hits of the day when I grew up. So give me anything, anything that comes on and I may search for things too and go like, I haven't heard that
Yeah.
tune in a long time.
We're
A phase where I'll start watching clips of certain guys or certain artists
yeah.
and just checking things out that I was not aware of.
We had Lawrence Juber on the show.
Sure,
Lawrence, of
Lawrence, yeah.
course, fantastic. And you know who too? Peter White
Yep. I
is
know Peter.
another fantastic. Have you have a chance to ever work with him, or you guys
No,
do any?
we're in the same circles.
Yeah,
We work with some of the same people. We've crossed paths a bunch of times. Lawrence and I know each other a little better than Peter. Peter, I met him one or two times. Nice
yeah.
guys, both very friendly and courteous Englishmen.
Yes.
But other than that,
We lost a friend last week, actually, a dear family friend, Ronnie Spector from the Ronettes.
oh yeah, that was a loss. Yeah.
Yeah, Be My Baby and all of that great music. There's a lot of great music out there, and you take a time to. You mentioned the chase and the resilience and the stamina, and you got to keep at it, keep at it. What does David Becker do to counter that? How do you breathe and calm and reboot? What are some of the things you do when you're not on the chase? You're not, constantly trying to improve and stay out there and do what you do. How do you shut down and shut off and, kickstart things again, reboot?
That's a good question. Well, a lot of it is just working through the music. If you're having a thing where you feel like you're not playing well or you kind of don't like what you're playing, I'll just keep playing or I'll stop and I'll just kind of go out and meditate for 5 minutes or I'll take a walk or something. I think it's important to stay true to the practice. I'm pretty regimented in how I do things as far as what I eat. routines about things. I've been doing it for such a long time. It works true. You can ask my wife Lori; she'll tell you that I do the same thing a lot. And I do this, but that works for me, and I think that's an important part of the whole thing because I don't differentiate having a conversation with somebody on the S-Bahn in Germany with playing a concert for 1,000 people, meaning that it's a moment in time where I'm communicating.
Right.
And I get as much or more out of that 5 minutes that I would out of a concert, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yes.
As and then I'll check out some music or something that'll inspire me that I haven't heard in a while. That always makes the juices flow. So
You want to play something for us before we get ready to wrap up, my friend?
sure, yeah, I can do something.
Another Jim Masters Show worldwide exclusive improvisation.
I'll do a certain piece that people might recognize, but I won't say what it is. It's I'll improvise with it. So.
That is really awesome, my friend. Really awesome. You really, your facial expressions, you're so in. Are you transported to another time and place when you're playing? You've got to be, huh?
You know, it's funny because, yeah, you're kind of in this zone, but there's also a part of you that's sort of aware of other things. I mean, it's hard to describe. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm the fan too, so I'm listening as well, and I'm kind of responding. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of different things happening at the same time. You know?
You've been doing this a long time. We're talking 4 decades, David.
Yes.
Why do you still love this? What brings you great blessing and joy in your life to do this work continually?
Just the fact that I get to do it. I think being a musician is a privilege. You know,
Yeah.
even if I didn't play as a living and I just played in my spare time, I think being a musician or some artistic thing, not just music, art, drawing, whatever, you know, acting, whatever, you really learn about life. You're privileged to see life through a lens that's very different from people that don't get to do that. And as I said, I don't take it for granted. So that's really a big part of why I still do it.
And you do it well, my friend. You do it well. And somebody that was joining us tonight, Mr. George Burns in the house.
Hey, George, I watch you and Gracie all the time.
All the time. He said you knocked it out of the park, my friend. He
Thank
thoroughly enjoyed it.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely enjoyed it, as did all of our viewers, our lovely viewers watching around the world. Everybody commenting, saying, awesome. Thanks for sharing your life and music. It was awesome. Your music just puts us in a good mood, David. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we wrap, I just wanted to just mention that the Batavia project is still ongoing. You can look it up. There's a lot of information about it, but I am planning to do a recording with the Metropole Orchestra. We had originally a concert scheduled a couple of years ago, but the pandemic hit. So we're going to do a recording of the whole record and make a documentary, which is going to talk about my mom's family during World War II. It's a really, really heavy project. But if there's anybody who's interested to know more about it, you can contact me through my website, and there's a page about it as well. So.
There it is, davidbeckertribune.com. That is awesome. Congratulations with that. The Metropole, of course, there in Holland in the Netherlands. What a fantastic orchestra, legendary as well. And we were talking about Dick Backer, of course, being with it for many, many years. That's going to be an amazing project. David, we raise a glass to you. Thanks so much for all this great time and your wit and wisdom. And I really hope that you come back again. We'll keep the porch light on for you, but also I hope the show met whatever expectations you had and you enjoyed the time with me as much as I certainly have with you, David.
I have to say it exceeded my expectations, and I had high expectations to begin. So I appreciate it, Jim.
The pleasure is all mine. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep making that magic for all of us, and much blessing and joy to you and Lori and your family. And whether you're out here on the East Coast or on the West, hope we get a chance to break bread at some point. That would be fantastic.
We'll stay in touch. We'll let you know we're back on the East Coast. So.
Absolutely. And if I'm on a TV shoot out in LA area, I'll let you guys know as well. And this was just an extraordinary way to spend this night. And thanks for being with us, my friend. Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Epic, epic, epic. And Toby says, as Jim said, you knocked it out of the park. Absolutely. Thanks, Toby. You take care, my friend, and go get a glass of water or a glass of wine. And as I always say to all guests, go stretch those legs.
I will.
You know, we chatted for almost 2 hours.
That it seemed like 10 minutes. So.
Yeah, it's what everybody says, which is really, really cool. And hey, what a good way to wrap. You got all these awards and accolades. Yes, that's not why you do what you do, but you are now a Lovety on the Jim Masters Show Live.
You had to be one.
Best award there is. You take care, my friend. Thanks for being with us. It was a blast.
All right, stay safe.
All right, you too. David Becker here on the Jim Masters Show live. And thanks, gang, for joining us. This was absolutely epic. I know he played a lot of great music. He improvised too, as well, which was really, really cool. So really, really special. You got a chance to hear his talent, his awesome playing, like Merlin says there in Canada. And Kathleen says, thank you for sharing your life and music with us. Absolutely. You guys were on fire with all the comments as well. And keep the comments coming, folks. Even when the show is not on live, you can definitely comment on our YouTube channel right underneath this episode. We would love that. So even when you're watching these episodes in the replay and the archives, definitely do leave a comment on our YouTube channel. That helps us big time, because then YouTube takes this episode and they blast it out even further. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe to Jim Masters TV. That is our YouTube channel that houses and archives the Jim Masters Show Live Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series. As always, give it a like, a thumbs up, and leave a comment on the YouTube channel as well. We thank David for being here. We thank all of you for being here as well. This was truly epic. DavidBeckerTribune.com is the website to check out all the music and so much more. And again, this was really great. Jane watching in Sweden, thank you. And Jen watching in Pennsylvania says, wow, what a great night. And Merlin in Canada, good evening, Jim and David and George. Stay safe. David and Laurie, and all of you as well. This is your host, Jim Masters, thanking you for your time this time till next time right here on the Jim Masters Show Live. We love you all. Continue to spread the word. Tell everybody about our series. Share the levity. Get on top of Mount Rushmore or Mount Everest with a bullhorn and say, I love the Jim Masters Show Live Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series, and you should watch it too. Spread the word, share the levity, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, we're back tomorrow, actually. We've got an amazing guest tomorrow as well, and we hope you join us then. Don't forget, you can see all the episodes on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. More comments coming in before we wrap here. Yes, we are still working on all of our episodes, Toby. It's a big process behind the scenes to do all these episodes. So you will see when you look at our YouTube channel, you will find out. And we also post it on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as well. Kathleen says, thanks, Jim, for a day of much needed levity. Yeah, we had 2 shows we did today. We had double levity today, which is really, really cool. Good to see you as well, Kathleen. And Christine, thank you as well. Great conversation and music. Maureen in Arizona, fabulous evening. Thanks, Jim. Love and hugs to you and Jim and the Lovities everywhere. Absolutely. Gang, we love you all. You guys take care. Be good to one another, okay? And thanks for watching this episode and all of the episodes you enjoy on the Jim Masters Show Live. We'll see you again soon, okay? Be well and cheers.